It's a down and dirty episode of Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate, and alongside Maren Angus Combs, the Hale Varsity softball writer and a softball coach who just came off of the field. As we sit down to chat, I am Nate Rohr, the voice of Husker softball on the radio, and plenty of softball things to discuss. We're not going to get too deep into your team. How'd practice go, though?
So yeah, I'm the head coach at Omaha Mercy High School, and we're doing team camp right now.
Mm-hmm.
Today was our second day, and it was okay.
Okay.
It's the begin. I got to take it easy. I can't be expecting them to come out, make no mistakes.
State championship level.
And be ready for the state tournament when they don't know everybody's name.
Yeah.
So
learning names is a good start.
Yeah, and names are hard. So, but it went all right.
All right. Well, my wife is a proud Mercy Girl alum, so she'll be happy to hear the softball program is making progress.
Yeah, and I mean, I've seen videos of your kids hitting off tees, so maybe we've got some. I know you got a girl, right?
I've got two of them,
You got
Lena
two.
and Maddie.
Maybe I got some future monarchs over in your house.
Perhaps we shall see. My son Bobby's the one that's out for T-ball right now, and if we can get him to look at, answer me this: are your players looking in toward home plate as the pitch comes in?
They're looking at the ball when it's coming.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that beats the hell out of my son. So
Bobby hasn't mastered.
We got a long way to go with him. All right. Anyhow, we are here mainly to talk about college softball, and of course, it's getting into the good part of the season as Super Regional round played last weekend. We have set the field for the Women's College World Series down in Oklahoma City. Just kind of the 30,000-foot view of Super Regionals. I got to say, it was kind of disappointing. I mean, especially after a great regional round where it seemed, and I forget what the number was, but about half of them went to the if necessary game, half the regionals. But Super Regionals, 6 of the 8 were sweeps. 7 of the 8 were won by the home teams. So, we've talked quite a bit about the parity in the sport and kind of the even nature of things. It didn't show itself last weekend.
No, and I think part of it could be this whole conversation of ranking the top 32, which could be something that may help moving forward if this is an avenue that the NCAA and the NFCA wants to go towards. But yeah, I have to say, I was very disappointed. There were run rules, there were a lot of lopsided scores, and for Super Regional, I really was expecting more game 3s.
Sure. Well, especially in this round, you're expecting, high levels of play from both sides, and especially the fact that home teams dominated. As I said, 7 out of 8 home teams advanced. That speaks to the importance of getting the seeding right, which is why Northwestern at 12 as a national seed still sticks in my craw, because they were underseeded.
Right.
Eric Lopez, who hosts In the Circle, a podcast like this that has more of a national view of softball, said you could flip Northwestern, slip them at 5, and Bama put them at 12, and nobody would have batted an eye. I'm not saying Northwestern should have been 5, but they darn sure were better than 12th, and the fact that they were slotted at 12th really gave them a rough Super Regional matchup and put them in a place in Tuscaloosa that is very difficult to play in, and unfortunately it was too much for them to overcome.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing that really we need to hammer home, is that when you go play in Tuscaloosa, you're playing in front of probably 6,000 people, if not more, when they fill the berm, and you've got people on the out in the parking lot and out and beyond. Like, Tuscaloosa is the largest ballpark in the country. And then you compare that to Northwestern, the J holds what?
Under 1,000, maybe.
So when you compare, and this was something I brought up on social media as well, was that a factor? Was that a factor?
Sure.
Did they look at Northwestern at some point as a 5 seed and see Alabama as a 12 seed and say, hey, well, if Alabama hosts, we could get 6,000 tickets sold. If we go to Northwestern, we're only going to have about 1,000.
Right. And I'm sure it factored into the bid that both schools were able to put in to host super regionals. And, you know, the NCAA wants competitive balance, but they're like, every single last one of us, where's the money?
Where's the money?
And there's a whole lot more money out of 6,000 tickets than 1,000 tickets. And so that really hurt Northwestern. And we've talked plenty about Sharon J. Drysdale Field being deficient, especially where it's a national TV series. You know, do they want to drag ESPN to a deficient press box and a place where the camera,
right, the product, right, the product on the field, the product that we as softball people are trying to sell is that we can sell tickets and that we can get advertising and we can really market this game. I mean, look at all the people, right? Look at these stadiums that we're playing in. And so if you were to have Northwestern host and you're looking at it on TV and you're like, they don't have lights.
Yeah.
You know, what? It's not that big.
Yeah.
Yeah. Weird. And then you flip over to another channel and you look at Norman, right?
Sure.
Let's look at Norman.
And they're replacing that place.
And like
Love's Field opens next year.
And so the comparison is difficult to make, but the product on TV is what they're selling. And the product on TV of what is happening in Tuscaloosa for a softball game is a lot more appealing than
the product and Evanston. Absolutely. But all the same, it was a terrific super regional. I think the argument's pretty solid that was the best super regional by a significant margin. It was one of two to go 2-3 games. Northwestern wins the first game. Danielle Williams pitches well, allows 6 hits in 7 innings. Northwestern wins it 3-1. Then Montana Fouts really turns it on the last 2 games this super regional. She actually pitched on Friday night, but it just felt like she settled in more as the weekend went on. And as she settled in, Alabama gained strength from her. And you know, especially in that environment at the Rhodes House, once the ball starts rolling against you, it's tough to stop.
Yeah. And I felt like everyone was just waiting to see Montana Fouts come into a game. And I have to be honest, I was impressed to see Alabama get to supers without Montana Fouts.
I was shocked.
And so the fact that they were able to do that, you know, that whole team was rallying because of Montana Fouts. And you could see that they were playing for her, trying to get her into a situation where she's not having to pitch from behind. You know, she can pitch with a lead and they can hang on to it. And I just felt like she did a phenomenal job. You could see how her knee is affecting her a little bit. Her velocity was down. Her stride is a little smaller, but she's still throwing it. And
sure.
And I think seeing, you know, we saw so many iconic moments, I feel like, this past weekend with teams getting to the World Series, but with Montana dropping to a knee and everyone, you know, the dog pile wasn't on top of her, it was around her. And I just felt like that was the moment I think everyone was wanting to see, and it happened.
So Montana Fouts comes out of the bullpen in both games. 2-1 victory on Saturday over Northwestern, 3-2 victory on Sunday for Alabama. Fouts throws 3 2/3 in that one. Where does Northwestern go from here? They lose Danielle Williams. They lose Jordan Rudd. They lose Cochran, I mean, that
Yeah.
they do have a couple of pieces back, but the vast majority of that team is gone.
Yeah.
And that's another reason why their seeding was so frustrating, because this was their last dance with that core.
With the core, right.
In the end, Northwestern softball is always going to be pretty good. But that core didn't, I think, have the chance that they had earned to get back to Oklahoma City.
Yeah. And so where do you go from here? Well, the obvious answer is to look at the transfer portal.
Yeah.
Free agency has arrived, and
yeah.
place your bid.
Yeah.
But it's hard to imagine Northwestern without Danielle Williams and without Jordan Rudd. But I think we saw this year that Lauren Boyd is ready.
Mm-hmm.
She is ready for this spotlight, and I think she can handle it. Who they have coming in to help her, they've got to prove themselves at this level. But honestly, I feel if I were Northwestern, I would feel pretty comfortable knowing that Lauren Boyd is going to move into my number 1 spot next season.
Certainly a piece you can build with Northwestern. Rebuilding that thing, though, is going to be tough, because it takes time there. And with the COVID year, I think that really played into Northwestern's advantage, because they, the high talent kid doesn't, a talented kid can go to Northwestern, but it's rarer that somebody that's just so naturally gifted shows up there. They have to develop their pieces, and they did, and they had time to build all these people up to where now they're starting from square one with everybody. And by the way, everybody's back on the same clock, or closer to the same clock anyway. And so it'll be a tougher rebuild, I think, for the Drohans. Not to say they won't get it done, but it's just a little longer road.
Yeah, and when I look at a program like a Northwestern, obviously they have high academic standards. It's the recruiting process is different, but I just want to point out, like, this super regional round featured Northwestern, Duke, and Stanford. Those are the three Power 5 toughest academic programs out there, and they're all playing, and they were all playing for supers. So, and we look at Stanford, right? And Alisher has done a great job of building that program basically from the ground up.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what this class that just left Northwestern was for them.
Yeah.
Right? They were the ground up. Yeah. And will they be back in the situation next year? Maybe not.
Yeah.
And then you look ahead of that, and UCLA comes knocking on the door. So, this is going to be a very different offseason for Northwestern, and it's going to be a different, I think, recruiting trail now.
Sure. Yeah, they've got to be a little more aggressive in terms of talent, but the academic standards are never going to bend there to where they can just grab the 5 best that they can. So that's Tuscaloosa. Bama wins that 2 games to 1. Anything stick out to you about Knoxville, Tennessee? Hammered Texas, combined score of 14-2. I thought the Longhorns had put up a little better fight. I thought Tennessee was clearly the better team. And that manifested itself in the super, but I thought the Longhorns had put up a little better fight.
Yeah, when I turned on the second game of that super, Texas waved the white flag.
Yeah.
And it kind of broke my heart to see it, because
it didn't break mine.
It broke my heart in a sense of, the right fielder was crying on the field.
Oh, sure.
After running through the ground ball that was hit to clear the bases, and the floodgates opened from there. But Texas is young.
Yeah.
They're so young. Like, the majority of that lineup is freshmen and sophomores. So to see them in that situation, being in supers and getting a national seed, with that young talent, I feel like for them, they're just going to be right back in it next year.
Yeah. I think the next step for them is hosting a super regional, and that's within their reach next year. I mean, if you're sitting 13 now, young team develops a little bit, gets a little something going in non-conference, then I think they can play their way up to a top 8 national seed. Maybe it was just karma for that second weekend when they stalled out that game against Kentucky. Or I guess it was the opening weekend when they were in extras with Kentucky. Kentucky took the lead. They were up against the drop dead time, and Texas basically did everything they could to stall it. But it was a walkover. Tennessee has been the best team in the Southeastern Conference all season long. And so as you look at that matchup between Bama and Tennessee, I mean, you have to pick Tennessee, don't you?
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, even with a healthy Montana Fouts, Tennessee is one of the top 2 hitting teams in the country.
Yeah.
And I know Montana Fouts is really good, and I know Montana Fouts is one of the best pitchers in the country, but that offense at Tennessee is potent.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed at the turnaround that has happened at Tennessee from the last couple of years, and to win the SEC outright as the regular season champs, and then to win the tournament title.
Yeah.
I'm looking at Tennessee going
deep run into the series.
Yeah.
Okay, we can get a little farther into the bracket as we go here. 2 walkovers kind of in the next WCWS matchup. Florida State just hammered Georgia.
Yeah.
12-3 combined score there. Florida. Here's the thing: Florida State's your number 3 national seed, but partially because of Oklahoma's dominance, partially because of UCLA for most of the year being the best challenger to Oklahoma, though they got run ruled. I don't feel like Florida State has gotten near the buzz or near the conversation that the other teams in this upper tier have. And what do you attribute that to? Because it feels like people are sleeping on the Noles.
Yeah, I've felt the same way, and I've tried to figure out why. Why is it that nobody's talking about Florida State? Honestly, they're a well-balanced team.
Yeah.
And when I look at Florida State top to bottom, I don't feel like they have that one standout player that everyone's talking about. So when we talk about UCLA, we automatically talk about Maya Brady or Megan Faramo. When we talk about Oklahoma, we're talking about Jordy Ball, and we're talking about Jada Coleman. Yeah. We're talking about Kinsey Hansen, right? This loaded
Jennings.
Star power.
Yeah.
Right? Every team, I feel like, has this one person that we're talking about. And then when you go watch Florida State, I just feel like we're talking about everyone equally. And maybe that's playing into it. That there's just no one that's overpowering with this all-star aura.
Yeah. That really draws you,
right?
Leading a great team where, right now 1 through 9 they're hitting it well. Maybe Catherine Sandercock,
I think,
might be the closest thing to that sort of player they had. She threw the perfect game in the regional, if necessary, game against South Carolina.
But even Catherine Sandercock, okay, they're playing South Carolina. Where was the buzz in that matchup? It was Donnie Goburn.
Yeah.
Everyone was talking about South Carolina. They weren't talking about Florida State.
Right. And the other part is Florida State has been at this level, where they're College World Series, ACC favorite, but yet they've not taken that next step to a national championship the last few years. Obviously, that's been the almost exclusive domain of Oklahoma, but at the same time, they've just, if they're going to get buzz, maybe they need to make a run to the final. But I think people have underappreciated them all year, and
I agree with that.
and they have had just such a consistent level of performance, and they're going to be a tough out in this World Series. On the other side of that matchup's Oklahoma State, and they killed Oregon, combined 17-1. It feels to me like Oklahoma State got right. I don't know if the pressure of trying to match last year was on them. I don't know if the Oklahoma monster, just the fact that OU was weighing on them. They fell into the regionals, but once they've gotten into regionals, they've dominated. They've played really well.
Yeah. And I felt like this super regional for the Cowgirls was what we were kind of waiting for, right?
Mm-hmm.
I felt like they were getting close, and unfortunately, I think it started in that regional final.
Yeah.
Then when they put up 9 runs, right? That was the beginning. And I think we've just seen them take off from there.
Yeah. Oklahoma State has combined 37-3, has won the 5 postseason games, combined 37-3. They're playing really well. And their regional was fairly tough, and Oregon was a nice team and maybe a little overmatched. But OSU was, like I said, they stumbled into regionals, and apparently the NCAA teams will do one of two things with going into NCAA. They'll either buckle under the pressure, or they'll take a deep breath and they'll go, well, fresh start, here we go. And it's kind of interesting talking to the OSU people when we were down there. They mentioned that Kenny Gajewski makes it a point. School's usually out the week, when the Big 12 tournament goes on. That's usually the last week of school. So he makes it a point before regionals, give them a day. They all go to a lake in Oklahoma as kind of a reward, kind of a reset, kind of a deep breath. And they did that this year.
Mm-hmm.
And normally, the fact that they do it normally, the fact that they do it every year made it a part of their routine, but it was probably more needed this year than any other year for all the struggles they had down the stretch.
Yeah. And you look at their lineup right now, with Rachel Becker doing what she's doing, Kelly Maxwell, arguably one of the best pitchers, right? And then enter Lexi Kilfoyle.
Yeah.
So I feel like we're looking at a very dangerous Oklahoma State team right now. If they carry their momentum into Oklahoma City, that's the other thing. They get to stay at home, right?
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
they're used to playing at Hall of Fame Stadium. That the Oklahoma fans will dominate ASA Hall of Fame Stadium, but Oklahoma State fans will find their way in too. So this matchup between Oklahoma State and Florida State in the first round of the College World Series, I think it's going to be highly compelling.
Yeah, I'm anticipating. Honestly, I would think it'd be low scoring.
Sure.
Because for them, we're talking about Kelly Maxwell and Catherine Sandercock.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's an A-list pitching matchup. That's an old school pitching matchup where you've got two headliners just duking it out. So I agree with your idea that this is going to be a low scoring first round game and a good start to the World Series. Now let's go out west. Washington shut out Louisiana twice, 8-0 and 2-0. And Ruby Malin, guest of the podcast last week, pitched well. Pitched in both games, through 5 shutout innings on 2 hits in game 1, and then in game 2, she pitched the 7th, so she got the save, and I think provided the enduring image from the first 2 weeks of this regional. She more or less broke down in tears.
Yeah.
After clinching the College World Series bid.
Yeah, for Washington, that first game, I don't think I was expecting a run rule to happen just immediately, right? Louisiana fought so hard to win their region down in Baton Rouge. I was a little surprised. Like they didn't have more oomph.
On the other hand, here's the case for the Ragin' Cajuns. you've got the regional in Baton Rouge, which is always going to be emotionally charged for them. They rallied to win that regional. Then you have the cross-country travel. There's not a regional that's farther away from them than the Seattle Super Regional. So they might have been emotionally spent. And here's the other thing, as Louisiana, and you don't want to rip on mid-majors too much, but you're not used to knocking down one challenge, one elite foe, and then having to gear back up and do it again.
Yeah, but here's the argument to make is that Louisiana thought they were deserving of a national seed. They had their RPI was high. They performed well. They thought they were going to get a top 16 seed. Now, as a top 16 seed, if you feel like you're deserving of it, you need to play like it. And I felt like once they made regionals, I think Washington showed us that maybe Louisiana really wasn't the national seed some people thought they were.
Yeah. I don't know if we can draw that assumption from them not playing all that well at Washington.
They got shut out completely.
Yeah, they did.
You can't win if you can't score.
No, that's true. I don't know. I'm of two minds of that, because you're right. They got dominated, and when a team like that goes on to a big national stage, especially after a conference season that doesn't really catch your eye and doesn't, there's not much to the Sun Belt in terms of elite teams. It's pretty much Louisiana, and that's it. And the fact that they get shut out for the weekend, that's a pretty big slap in the face, especially for a program like Louisiana that usually is one of the best in the country offensively. On the other hand, they did what they did this season. And, I don't know if they should have been a top 8 national seed. They shouldn't have been. But I think their resume had them 15th, 16th, something like that. And in that scenario, I would like to at least see them get a shot to win a regional at home, because it felt like they spent a lot of energy to get out of Baton Rouge.
Yeah.
And they just couldn't gear it back up the following week against Washington. Now, on the other hand, if you're elite, if you are an Oklahoma City worthy program, you find a way. And they just didn't do it.
Yeah.
So Washington advances. The other West Coast regional, super regional, Utah and San Diego State, speaking of mid-majors, the only other super to go 3 games. But, San Diego State wins game 1. It felt like Utah took that shot on the chin and said, okay, we're the better team here. And we need to play like it. And they won 10-1 and 7-2.
Yeah. So the first game, I was thrilled to see San Diego State win. I think a lot of people probably were, just because they've never been there before.
Sure.
They've never been there before. All right. Now, you go into game 2 thinking, okay, San Diego State, what are you going to do? Because you're up 1-0 in this series. And they were so tight.
Yeah.
They played so tight. And I think on the broadcast for game 3, they even mentioned that Stacy Newman-Denise, the head coach of the Aztecs, said she was tight. Yeah. And it felt like because the coaches were tight, it was spilling out into the players. And so everyone was tight, and you can't play that way. And those are mistakes happening that shouldn't be happening. That's swinging at pitches you shouldn't be swinging at. And honestly, Mariah Lopez pitched every single pitch for Utah. Yeah. I mean, I was like, okay, you've seen her 9 times now. But
you got to figure
it out. Credit to where credit is due, and that's Paige Parker, the pitching coach at Utah. That's DJ Gasso, the associate head coach at Utah. I mean, it's an Oklahoma party over in Utah right now. So, and I think that's why Amy Hogue brought them there, right? Because they they are Oklahoma Sooners, right? They have been there. They've won national championships. They've learned from some of the best coaches in the country, and they're taking what they learned at the top program and instilling that into Utah.
Yeah, and Utah's got some fertile ground to grow in the Pac-12. A program that's kind of an undervalued asset.
Yeah.
It seems like there's a good amount of passion and backing for softball. You just don't know.
Right.
If a program succeeds, will the fans come out? Well, Utah's fans packed that stadium. First time they had an opportunity to host a super regional, and they hosted regionals as well, obviously. So you've got real estate, you got players, you've got the right in terms of coaching. You have a conference that provides you some runway. I think they're riding the momentum of having won the Pac-12 tournament. I think that gave them a real boost.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting. I don't know that we'll ever hear this from the Pac-12 coaches. I wonder what they thought of how the conference tournament affected them.
Mm-hmm.
UCLA, of course, gets knocked out in the finals, but UCLA getting to the finals, that should be something that they sit there and go, oh, we're okay. Stanford wasn't all that great. Washington wasn't all that great in that tournament. Didn't hurt them. But boy, I think it's really helped Utah.
Absolutely. And I think Utah winning that, like you said, the momentum they got from winning that tournament, they've just run through this postseason.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I'm most excited to see Utah in the World Series.
Interesting. Yeah. How will they react to this big stage? I think that's the big question, because Utah's not a program that starts out talking about the Women's College World Series, although, again, because of Paige Parker and JT Gasso.
JT, DJ.
Or DJ, you're right.
Which one is it?
I think it's DJ.
Let's ask the Google machine really quick before we go on.
Before we go on, credit the lad for what he's done. How about that, though? Paige Parker is the pitching coach at Utah. Michelle Gascoigne, pitching coach at Northwestern. So to Oklahoma, number 2 pitchers. So it is DJ Gasso. Pardon me. I don't know why I had JT.
Because he's at Oklahoma.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
That's why.
I'm getting my alphabet soup mixed up. Anyhow, Gasso boy, the Gassos know how to coach softball. I think we've established that.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, OU, they win both games of their super regional. You mentioned, though, that you were a little disappointed in them.
I was. Here, am I disappointed in Oklahoma, or am I disappointed that nobody can beat them? Like, which one? I don't know which one it is, because as I'm watching game 2 of the Oklahoma Clemson series, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, we're going to see a game 3.
Yeah.
It just felt that way. I mean, Kinsey Hansen hit a game-tying home run on a ball that was at her eyeballs, out and off the plate, and she pulled it to left field. I was just like, okay, never mind.
Yeah. Oklahoma just has that soul-crushing dominance right now. I mean, they're ahead 3 or 4 runs when they step on the field. Yeah. The one thing that might trip them up is just the pressure that's on them, because everybody is expecting them to win.
Right.
They certainly have the talent to go through this Women's College World Series, but expectations can be a funny thing. And you wonder that first game that they're, whether it's the Stanford game in the first round or later in the bracket, they're down 2-0, 3-0, do they tighten up?
Right.
Do they get afraid? Because now you have the weight of a winning streak on your back and the expectations you've had since day 1 of a national title.
And I also think we saw in game 2 of that series what happens when they are in a close game. Here's the thing. They don't play in many close games.
No.
So, and I think that is honestly detrimental to your team by the time you get into postseason when you don't have the experience of playing in tight games, playing from behind.
Mm-hmm.
They made 3 errors in that game.
Oof. Yeah.
And with Brito making 2 errors in 1 inning at third base, I think 1 was called a hit, but like, let's be real, scoring is screwed up right now.
Scoring can be home cooking.
Yeah. So realistically, Brito made 2 errors in that 1 inning, and that was the inning where Clemson ended up taking the lead.
Mm-hmm.
So, but also, I mean, Clemson did a good job.
They hung in there. They
Valerie
traded blows.
Valerie Cagle was named Player of the Year yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
I think when we look at the super regional field and we say Louisiana could have been a 16 seed,
mm-hmm.
There's a reason why Clemson was a 16 seed.
Yeah.
And it was because the Player of the Year should be on a team, a national seed team.
Sure.
And that was what happened. They scored the most runs on Oklahoma this year.
Yeah. Put up 7 in the Saturday game.
I think once they hit 3, once they hit 2.
Oh boy.
It was some stupid stat like that. I'm gonna call it a stupid stat because it is. Like once they hit, it was like 4. I think they scored 4 runs, and all of a sudden I'm hearing that's the most anyone scored on Oklahoma this year. I'm like, okay,
that's their level of dominance. It's just so overwhelming to see them, to put their lineup in your mind and go, well, geez, how do you get through this? And
there's nowhere to breathe.
No, not at all. Not at all.
When you're on defense, when you're pitching, I can't imagine being a pitcher against Oklahoma because you're thinking normally once you get through 1 through 6, you've got a few batters to breathe with 7 through 9.
Mm-hmm.
Not with them.
No. It's terrifying.
Yeah.
So OU advances out of the Norman Super Regional. They'll face the Stanford Cardinal, the only road team to win at Super. They swept Duke, held them to 3 runs, and to top it all off, they beat them at the crack of dawn on Saturday in a game moved up to avoid bad weather. Impressive showing out of Stanford.
Honestly, Jessica Allister just has done wonders with that program. It's her alma mater. She's doing things with Stanford that we saw her do with Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so I think this is almost expected, right? Last year they lost in supers. This year they've made it to the World Series, and with Nigeri Kennedy, she's the freshman Player of the Year.
Yeah.
I think this is a good matchup. And I say this because we saw Clemson as a team Oklahoma hadn't faced, give them a run for their money, and Oklahoma has not played Stanford. So I think when they see someone that they haven't played, when they see a pitcher they have never faced, that it can change the outcome a little bit.
It can certainly take them a little while to get their footing and get into it. Well, let's take a look at the WCWS bracket. We've kind of dipped our toe into it, but OU Stanford begins it, the 1 versus the 9 seed. You said Stanford has a puncher's chance.
I do. And, I would think game 1, they're going to come out with Jordy Ball and Nigeri Kennedy. I don't see why not.
Yeah.
Unless Patty decides to go Storako as a senior.
Yeah, real drop off.
Right. As the super senior of the pitching staff, she could go Storako, but as of right now, Jordy's your ace, and Nigeri Kennedy is the ace of the Stanford staff, and I don't see why that we don't see that matchup immediately.
Oof. That'll be a fun start to the series. You've got Bama, Tennessee. We talked a little bit about that matchup. Florida State, Oklahoma State. I don't know where to go with that one because, like I said, FSU's kind of ridden under the radar, but is a really good team. Oklahoma State's about as hot as anybody right now.
I think I'm going to go Florida State, to be honest. they're just so good.
Yeah.
They're so good, top to bottom. Every position, they're solid. I just think, and I think maybe it is they flew under the radar. Maybe that's gonna help them.
And they're going to be hungry to show that, hey, we're as good as
right.
Oklahoma. We're a top tier team. And then Washington and Utah, Pac-12 rematch. I have to give a real edge to Washington here, having been on the stage, having been a program that expects to get there. I think the Huskies have the edge in this one.
Yeah, and at the same time, I think the Utes are playing with house money.
Mm-hmm.
I really do. I think that if we look at this field of 8 teams, Utah is the team that sticks out to me with the least amount of pressure.
Mm-hmm. I think that's fair, absolutely. Especially, Stanford might be the one also that's kind of sitting there going, okay, we've exceeded our expectations, because looking at the rest of the field, obviously Oklahoma, Tennessee, Bama, Oklahoma State expected to be here, Florida State expected to be here, Washington expected to be here. So I think you're right in saying that Utah is sitting there going, well, what do we have to lose? I just think that stage is so big. I mean, you think about it. So think about it in these terms. Your biggest stadiums in SEC baseball hold 10,000 people. Charles Schwab Field holds 25,000, so 2.5 times.
Mm-hmm.
The women's series, OG&E Field, OG&E Energy Field down in Oklahoma City, I believe they can get 10,000 in there.
It's just over 10,000 now.
And the biggest crowd you're playing in front of in the Pac-12 is 2 or 3. I mean, that's 3 to 4 times bigger. So and obviously that's a simplistic way of looking at it, but I just think the stage is going to be a lot for Utah and for Stanford to take in. I think they're 2 good teams, but I just don't. If I had to pick who my 2 and Qs would be, I think those are your most likely suspects, and not just because they're the lowest seed. I know it's easy.
Well, those 2 also rely on 2 freshman pitchers.
Sure.
Right? So, or not fresh. Well, Stanford's a freshman pitcher, but there's my argument for Washington, because Ruby is a freshman, right?
Right.
So that's why when I look at this Washington-Utah matchup, Ruby hasn't been on this stage.
That's true.
She's manifested her dream.
Right.
But she hasn't been there yet.
Yeah.
So how does she handle that pressure? And so for me, when I'm looking at these 2 matchups of Utah, Washington, Stanford, Oklahoma, I like Utah in a sense of it's a veteran lineup. They're doing this all together for the first time.
Yeah.
And you've got that Oklahoma coaching staff, right? You have some experience of what this is like coming from your coaches. And then when I look at Stanford and Oklahoma's been there.
Sure.
They've been there. They know what's happening. Stanford hasn't. Like, you're not expected to win, so
why put a lot of weight on yourself?
Yeah, why put the extra pressure on yourself to win when nobody else does?
That's fair. All right, give me your bracket picks. Bracket 1 winner, bracket 2 winner, and then how do you think the championship series will go?
Well, obviously, I have to say Oklahoma will probably be playing for a national title. Most likely.
Yes.
But what's funny to me, are we still doing cross bracket?
Yeah, they cross bracket.
Semis is a cross bracket, right?
Yep.
So could we see Tennessee?
Ooh, yeah, we could. If we could, but I'm trying to think where they would. Yeah, they drop after losing in the semis. The loser of the semis drops. So assuming OU and Tennessee win their first round games, if OU beats Tennessee, Tennessee goes down to the other bracket. So is that where you're going?
I'm leaning that way.
Okay.
I'm leaning that at least that's what I would like to see. I think it's so weird that I'm saying that, but that's what I would like to see. If I'm just basing this as off of brackets like what we have in front of us, then my gut instinct is OU and Florida State.
So you're picking OU, Florida State.
Yeah.
How many games? 2 or 3?
2.
OU and 2. Okay.
I think there's a run rule in there too.
Oof. Yeah, the Sooners are a machine right now. Obviously, I'm picking Oklahoma out of that top bracket. I'm very tempted to take Oklahoma State.
I thought about that as well.
They're playing really well. They're
Could you imagine
Whew.
Bedlam for a national title?
For a national championship.
Last year we got Red River and we could get Bedlam.
Yeah. You know what? I'm picking it.
You're doing it.
I'm going with the Pokes out of the bottom bracket against Oklahoma. Give me the Sooners in 3.
Oh.
Because, Oklahoma State played them fairly tough. I feel like they're due to get one against OU. They're playing well. So I'll ride with the Pokes to the finals, and then I'm hopping off the horse because Oklahoma is my pick to win. Oklahoma's just better, but Oklahoma State's good. I think they're peaking. I think they'll draw something from the atmosphere. So yeah, that's my pick. I'll take OSU out of the other bracket against Oklahoma, then the Sooners in 3. So hopefully a compelling and exciting Women's College World Series ahead of us, and we'll take it all in. We will take next week off so that we can wrap up the Women's College World Series, and we'll be back in 2 weeks with the final episode for 2023 of Behind the Plate with Maren and Nate. Until then, for Maren Angus Combs, this is Nate Rohr saying thanks for listening. Talk to you again in a couple weeks.